Is the screen visible now?
Yes, madam. Visible.
So here's a very hearty welcome to all of you to this presentation. இன்னைக்கு நம்ம ரொம்ப சிம்பிளா சொல்ல மாட்டேன். நம்ம இன்னைக்கு என்ன பார்க்க போறோம்னா we're going to look at Companies Act amendments, the recent amendments. So 4 things we will be discussing in this webinar. One வந்து amendments to accounts rules. Second வந்து amendments to auditors rules. Third வந்து schedule 3 amendments, which is the most important for us because it applies to all companies. Small, big, there is no change. For all companies that we are handling, schedule 3 amendment is applicable. And if time permits, I will walk you through CSR. So one of the most important things I think this COVID has done is, it's not an auditor in Chennai or it's an auditor in Tirupur or Coimbatore. I think the entire market has become flat and everybody has become used to even virtual audit. So today, even in that sense, CSR consulting, if you have to do, it's not necessary you have to be based in Delhi or Bombay, which is where the bulk of the CSR consulting happens. Everybody can do anything today insofar as we have the confidence. First, the confidence. Second, competence. Competence we can always build. So, and whatever I'm going to discuss, how can we actually put it to use with a client and how to actually find a client for all this. So it's not just that only the statutory auditor can do. In fact, a lot of these things assistant statutory auditor cannot do. So you can do it for cases where there are other statutory auditors. Of course, I do understand in the smaller, the SMP segment, this is a small bit of a challenge where the auditor does everything. But nevertheless, I think idellame are emerging professional opportunities. And one of the most important things I want to tell you is the difference between a lawyer and a chartered accountant. For a lawyer, every problem is an opportunity. Whereas for every chartered accountant, we say, oh, it's a problem. A problem is not a problem. It's actually an opportunity. It's an opportunity to service the client more. And of course, towards the end of the session, we will discuss this issue of charging fees, which I think has to en masse improve in this entire country as a whole. More importantly, I think in the southern part of this country. I think generally on an overall basis as a profession, we seem to be undercharging. And this can come only with collective involvement. Everybody should decide, okay, I'm a chartered accountant, this should be my charge out rate. So what are these changes? These changes are going to have an overarching impact on corporates, boards, operating management, owner, forget board, adala illana kuda, tomorrow to be able to even access a bank fund, which I'm sure a bulk of the corporates in Tirupur are already going for. All this will become critical and important. So this will also have an impact on how you function as an auditor and what our own audit risks are. It's not just signing. Signing, you'll get a notice sort of immediately. So these changes again reiterate the principles of Companies Act. Even when you're advising a client, you have to tell them, see, number avangala partnership poda sollala. Company poda sollala. But today, if you have decided to be a company, this Companies Act has to be complied with. யாராவது கேட்கலாம், நான் இப்ப கம்ப்ளை பண்ணலன்னா என்ன அப்படின்னு ஒரு கிளைண்ட் கேட்டாங்கன்னா, all you have to tell them is you try not complying, you will see what is your penalty and your problems. And another reason why I think especially in the Schedule 3 changes are important because today everybody is sharing information. Income tax, GST is sharing information. Now we report all this in our annual balance sheet. The MCA will also start sharing information, and I actually think there's a lot more work for people in practice today. So your client kita simple as solla. Every section, every amendment of the Companies Act stands for 3 things. Accountability. They want the board, the management to be accountable. Second, corporate governance. You should always realize that the shareholder is different, the director is different. That's corporate governance. That a director is only a trustee. Now, what is the big deal? It's only a husband and wife company. It's like a governance. No. You could be a husband and wife closely held company, but you've gone to the bank and taken 25 crores, 50 crores, 75 crores limit. Then you become accountable. That is also governance. Governance is not only the responsibility of the director to the shareholder. It is the director's responsibility to everybody, to the income tax authority, to the GST authority, to the shareholders, obviously. and to every segment. Just 1 minute. So this is what you first, this is my opening part, that you have to appreciate that there is a change. Your client has to appreciate that they need to make this change, and they need to appreciate your role in this change, which is huge. In the change, there's a little bit of a confusion. That's why I thought I will put this slide first. March 24th, 2021, we don't know what happened. They just came and pumped in so much change in terms of the Companies Act. There were 3 important changes. Schedule 3 matram was 1. Accounts rule matram was the 2nd. Audit rules changing was the 3rd. Schedule 3, we'll go through it in detail. Many changes. That's it. நாங்க முன்னாடி பார்த்த schedule 3க்கும் இப்ப பார்க்குற schedule 3க்கும் there is going to be, in addition to what you were reporting earlier, it's a huge change. Second, accounts rules. Accounts rules, there were only 3 changes. Suddenly they said all companies need to have a compulsory audit trail, which is undeletable. This is romba important for those companies which are on tally specially. How is this client going to manage? One tally. Innone homegrown ERPs. Let's say they're all in the textile business and they've done their own ERP. And that ERP is a books of accounts. The accounts rule does not apply to those people who are maintaining manual accounts. But books of accounts, if you are maintaining in electronic form, this amendment is important. Accounts rule இன்னொரு change இருந்தது, which is ஏதாவது NCLT-க்கு ரெஃபர் பண்ணியிருந்தாங்கனாலோ இல்ல வெறும் டிமாண்ட் நோட்டீஸ் வந்திருந்தா கூட you have to report it. மூணாவது என்னன்னா, it was anyway I'll be covering it in detail. Valuation during availment of loan versus valuation during OTS. இந்த 3 மாற்றம் தான் accounts rulesல வந்திருக்கு. So அதுலயும் என்ன பண்ணாங்கன்னா, ஒரு subsequent amendment notificationல they said compulsory audit trail ஒரு வருஷம் தள்ளி வைக்கிறோம். That means இந்த வருஷம் நம்ம கிளையண்ட் பில்ட் பண்ணாதான் April 1, 2022 அன்னைக்குல இருந்து அந்த ஆடிட் ட்ரெயில நம்ம as an auditor செக் பண்ணி சொல்லணும். So it's important. Third audit rules. Audit rulesல there were 5 rules. Again, if I were to describe it in English, it is lethal. First specified bank notes omitted. That was an obvious omission. ஏன்னா இப்ப demonetization முடிஞ்சு SBNs are gone. Second they spoke about funds received for ultimate beneficiary, which I will come to again later. Funds provided to an intermediate company, dividend compliance, and audit trails. இப்போ நீங்க இங்க பாத்தீங்கன்னா the audit trails of accounting rules and audit trails of audit rules, there is a certain marriage that will happen eventually. And all these 3 have to be married to schedule 2. Now, இதுல there were only 2 specific date change amendments. ஒன்னு compulsory audit trails and accounts rules, ரெண்டாவது audit rules. இன்னி வரைக்கும் there is no notification that this you don't have to report, because the commencement date was given as April 1, 2021. அப்படின்னா as an auditor, if I issue a report after 2021 April 1, I have to comply. But nobody has come with a clarification on this till now. Ana, பெரிய company, I'm told even Infosys, I have not checked the balance sheet. They have assumed that this whole thing is only applicable next year. So அதுதான் இங்க அதே மாதிரி தான் schedule 3. Schedule 3 they have not said anything specific, but the general presumption is that it may apply only for accounting periods after April 1, 2022, but further clarification needs to be obtained. That is reporting periods after April 1, 2022 க்கு தான் இது apply ஆகும். So first we'll come to accounts rules. So இதுல there were 3 changes. You look at the wording very carefully. Provided for any financial year commencing on or after April 1, 2021, now amended to 2022, every company which uses accounting software for maintaining its books of accounts. So thankfully, they are talking only about accounting software. Shall use only such accounting software, which has a feature of recording audit trail of each and every transaction, creating an edit log of each change, along with the date of such change, and ensuring that the audit trail cannot be disabled. I'm not an expert on Tally, but I know that you can go change the cash balance of October 21st on April 10th when I am actually doing the audit for the next year. Now, if you make that change, see, today the government is very clear. You're the director, you're the accounting person, you're the management. நீங்க என்ன வேணா சேஞ்ச் பண்ணிக்கோங்க உங்க புக்ஸ்ல, பிரச்சனையே இல்ல. ஆனா the auditor should know, first of all, the management should have an audit trail, and the auditor should confirm that the audit trail is there. இப்போ இதுல பாத்தீங்கன்னா there is a small dichotomy which was already always there. இப்போ எல்லா நிறைய கம்பெனிக்கு ICOFER is applicable, correct? இப்போ நம்ம ஐகோஃபர்ல என்ன சொல்றோம், இன்டர்னல் கண்ட்ரோல்ஸ் ஓவர் ஃபினான்ஷியல் ரிப்போர்ட்டிங் எல்லாம் நல்லா இருக்கு அப்படின்னு சொல்றோம். ஆனா நம்ம அதை எப்படி சொன்னோம்? டாலியில ஆடிட் லாக் இல்லாத டைம்ல நம்ம சொல்லிருக்க வாய்ப்பு கம்மி. பட் தென் we would have taken other supervening controls and said, okay, my client is more or less good. இன்னைக்கு it is a triple impact. The impact is on the management to ensure there is an audit trail. The impact is on the auditor in my audit report itself. Where this rule has come, and the IEPF லாம் சொன்னாங்க இல்லையா, அதுல மெட்டீரியல் லிட்டிகேஷன், IEPF மூணாவது இது. இந்த கிளாஸ் எல்லாம் ஆடிட் ரூல்ஸ்லாம் அங்க மெயின் ரிப்போர்ட்லயே it will start coming. So that is the second place where as an auditor you are impacted. Third வந்து உங்க ICOFER ரிப்போர்ட்லயும் this will get figured. So it's very, very important. So let's look at the practical aspect. A client comes to you. See, you are the auditor. So obviously you cannot implement an accounting system. Now, idliye vandu rendu madriya you can look at your client. If your client is a public interest entity, please be very, very careful with all this. Now, who is a public interest entity? India, we have not defined a public interest entity. But generally, for a public interest entity, na, either a large number of shareholders, listed company இருக்கலாம், public company இருக்கலாம். ஏன்னா up to, I mean, you can have more than 200 shareholders. மூணாவது, any form of நிறைய employees இருக்காங்க. That becomes a public interest entity, in my view. The fourth is you have accepted some deposits from the public. It could even be a 73 violation la vanda deposit கூட இருக்கலாம், but you become a public interest entity. அதே மாதிரி you've got a bank loan. Even 1 crore, why 1 crore? Even 1 lakh of a bank loan, whether it is a working capital limit or a term loan, makes you a public interest entity. Please be very careful. If let's say husband and wife are doing their architecture business in a corporate form, they are doing something, they have no bank loan, and the madri client, you can treat them less stringently. It is very important. Second one, now obviously we all know there is a new law, which is the insolvency code. அதுல என்ன சொல்ற, அதுல வந்து there are two stages. இங்க என்ன சொல்றாங்கன்னா, details of application made or any proceeding pending under the insolvency code. I'm sure the institute also will come with some guidance. But in the application made வந்து அப்படின்னா என்னன்னா, நம்ம ஆடிட் பண்ற கம்பெனி, நம்ம கிளைண்ட் கம்பெனி பேர்ல NCLT ல இன்சால்வென்சி ஸ்டார்ட் பண்ணணும் அப்படின்னு ஒரு சின்ன சப்ளையர் கூட ஃபைல் பண்ணலாம். இன்னைக்கு 1 crore மேல டிஃபால்ட் இருந்ததுன்னா they can go file an application. Or any proceeding pending அப்படின்னா என்ன, CIRP இருக்கலாம், which is the corporate insolvency resolution processல இருக்கலாம், இல்ல liquidation processல கூட இருக்கலாம். அப்படின்னா you have to report. Third, accounts rulesல the details of difference between the valuation done at the date of OTS and the valuation done while taking the loans. Now, India has also been very slow to react. ஏன் அப்படி சொல்றேன்னா, நம்ம கம்பெனிஸ் ஆக்ட் வந்த வரைக்கும், 247 of the Companies Act வந்த வரைக்கும் இந்த ரெஜிஸ்டர்ட் வேல்யூவர்னு ஒண்ணுமே கிடையாது. யாரு என்ன பண்ணிட்டு இருந்தாங்க, there'll be one bank valuer. அவர் வந்து he would not have studied to be a valuer. It is not a profession. So accountabilityயும் அந்த valuer மேல இல்லவே இல்ல. So what was happening? Loan வாங்கும்போது one piece of land, 1 acre would have got valued at 15 crores. மேனிக்கு 10 ஏக்கர் 150 கோடி. OTS போகும்போது actually பாத்தீங்கன்னா அந்த land is hardly worth 30, 40, 50 lakhs. This is the biggest problem staring at all the banks today. So, இப்போ வந்து நம்ம ஓடிஎஸ்க்கு பண்ணும்போது they want that accountability to come on the balance sheet. So this particular clause may not hit your client so much because the bank is also supposed to have their valuer, correct? This particular clause, if there is a variation, it will hit the bank. The banks will be questioned. அது எப்படிங்க இப்போ ஓடிஎஸ் அன்னைக்கு இவ்வளவுதான் இருக்கு, அந்த டைம்ல அவ்வளவு வேல்யூ இருந்தது? That will be the first question. செகண்ட் கொஸ்டின் வந்து, இப்ப நீங்க இன்னி டேட்ல ஓடிஎஸ் பண்ற நாளன்னைக்கு 100 கோடி வேல்யூ இருக்குன்னா நீங்க ஏங்க 5 கோடிக்கு ஓடிஎஸ் செட்டில் பண்ணீங்க? Two questions will arise now. But having said all this, I also think the current government regime seems to be slightly MSME friendly because this is another very good area. A lot of clients in MSME can now come for pre-packs in insolvency. And maybe chairman should actually have a session on this because it could be a very, very useful topic, especially for areas such as Coimbatore, Salem, Erode, Tirupur, where there's a huge industrial belt and a manufacturing belt, and people could be financially stressed and they may want help in this regard. So, these are changes in accounts rules. As I had mentioned, the most important one, the audit trails. So, left side, I have put out books of accounts. Who is applicable for this? Maintaining an electronic form. 2, accounting software, audit trail, each and every transaction, edit log of each change, date. So, இப்ப என்ன சொல்றாங்கன்னா, நீங்க வந்து cash entry, உங்க client தப்பாவே போட்டிருக்கலாம். நீங்க போயிட்டு ஒரு cash entry, so the first concept, what they are trying to bring is anti-dating of transactions. இப்ப நான் மார்ச் 31 அன்னைக்கு ஒரு என்ட்ரி பாஸ் பண்ண, சப்போஸ் நம்ம வந்து மார்ச், இது நம்ம ஒரு 1 year புஷ் பண்ணுவோம். சப்போஸ் ஐ ஆம் டூயிங் 21-22 ஆடிட் ட்ரைல் எப்படி இருக்கணும் அப்படின்னா, இப்ப நான் வந்து மேல வந்து ஒரு கேஷ் இன்வர்ட விட்டுட்டாங்க. இத வந்து நீங்க ஆடிட்டும் போதுதான் கண்டுபிடிக்கிறீங்க. அப்போ நீங்க வந்து ஆடிட் பண்ணும்போது இட் இஸ் April 2023. அன்னைக்கு வந்து you are passing an entry at a backdated date. They want an audit trail. First of all, nobody should be passing backdated entries, but this could be a huge problem. Now, another big reason why I think this has come, they have again married a whole lot of provisions. நீங்க பாத்தீங்கன்னா, another thing that we should possibly talk about is also Caro. Caroல இப்ப என்ன சொல்லிருக்காங்கன்னா, பேங்க்குக்கு கொடுக்கிற ஸ்டாக் அண்ட் புக் ஸ்டேட்மெண்ட்டும் பினான்சியல் புக்ஸும் டேலி ஆகணும்னு ஸ்டாட்யூட்டரி ஆடிட்டர் காரோல சொல்லணும். That provision was never there earlier. நம்ம client பேங்க்குக்கு என்ன கொடுக்குறாங்களோ we were never checking it. But today, all stock and book debts, as a chartered accountant, as a statutory auditor, இப்ப அவங்க செப்டம்பர் 30th ஒரு ஸ்டாக் அண்ட் புக் டெட்ஸ் கொடுத்துருக்காங்கன்னா நம்ம அதை செக் பண்ணணும். சோ இப்ப என்ன ஆகும், செப்டம்பர் 30th அன்னைக்கு பூஸ்ட் பண்ணிட்டு அக்டோபர் 1st அன்னைக்கு ரிவர்ஸ் பண்றாங்கன்னா அதெல்லாம் will become an audit trail. So they're very, very clear. இப்ப நீங்க பாத்தீங்கன்னா what are all the applications? உங்களுக்கு ஸ்டாண்டர்ட் அப்ளிகேஷன்ஸ் இருக்கு, டேலி அந்த மாதிரி. இப்ப there could be homegrown ERP. உங்க client can be having his own ERP. பட் ஒரே ஒரு ரிலீஃப் இந்த ப்ரொவிஷன்ல என்னன்னா அக்கவுண்டிங் சாஃப்ட்வேர்னு சொல்லிட்டாங்க. சோ இப்ப நீங்க ஃபைனலி எல்லா அக்கவுண்ட்ஸும் டேலியில தான் போடுறீங்க அப்படின்னா நீங்க டேலியை மட்டும் கரெக்டா வச்சுட்டா இட்ஸ் மோர் தென் எனஃப். பட் if the inventory is coming into some ERP and from there it is automatically entering tally, then you have a problem. That ERP also should have audit trails, audit logs, etc. மூணாவது இந்த bespoke software, இந்த பெரிய SAP, JD Edwards அந்த மாதிரி. இப்போ ஃபார் எக்ஸாம்பிள் ஸ்டாண்டர்ட் அப்ளிகேஷன் சொல்லும் போது when I'm talking about tally, even your payroll packages, உங்க rely on whatever are, I'm not sure about the other payroll packages, But all that also will have to go through this ERP check. Idhula as an auditor, உங்களுக்கு என்ன ரோல் இருக்குன்னா, all this is called as ITGC, IT General Controls. அதனால தான் நான் என்ன சொல்றேன்னா, don't look at this as a problem. Look at this as an opportunity. So many of us have finished DISA. What is it to do an IT audit? It's pretty simple. Today, again, this is a very personal thing that I like to talk about. See, when I first was practicing in 2005, 6 and all, to this date, I don't practice in income tax because I used to be very scared. Yaravadhu in the 195 certificate la ketangana, namalukku and the DTA book irukadu. So I will call up somebody, check, he will confirm. Ana innikku appadi illa. Everything is available. Governments themselves give you copies of the DTA. You can go and take it from the websites, etc. So today, because you have this advantage of, there's an author called Thomas Friedman. He said the world is flat. Today, the world is truly flat. Sitting in the report, you'll be able to deliver the same level of service if only you have the confidence. So bespoke software, Microsoft Excel. நம்ம வந்து fixed asset register Excel ல வச்சிருப்போம். Then the impact of such fixed asset register being in Excel will have to be examined because it becomes an accounting software. இதுல வந்து இந்த IT audits will become very important. Again, as a statutory auditor, we should not say I will do all the work. I'm saying today, let's start sharing work within this fraternity. So, நீங்க IT audits பாத்தீங்கன்னா ரெண்டு மாதிரி audit இருக்கு. ஒன்னு வந்து IT General Control Audit. That is access, passwords, basic things to do with an IT General Control. ரெண்டாவது வந்து ஸ்பெசிஃபிக்கா அப்ளிகேஷன் ஆடிட். இப்போ உங்க கிளையண்ட் ஒரு பேரோல் சிஸ்டம் வச்சிருக்காங்க, இல்ல இந்த ERPA இருக்கு. How do I audit that? Everything finally boils down to input, process, output, data custody, data maintenance. So my suggestion is we should go back and open our DISA books and not look at DISA only from a point of view of bank audits, empanelments, etc. I think there is a potential here. இப்போ நம்ம audit trails அப்படின்னா what does it entail? What do I need to know? Every single entry, date of creation, by whom, details of the transaction, date of change, who made the change, details of the change, and when they are talking edit log அப்படின்னு சொல்றாங்க. அப்படின்னா the system itself will create the log. So what becomes very important? We should have the ability to be able to see that log as an auditor. That's very important. அப்படின்னா whatever your client is using software, you ask them to start work today to create an edit log. So usually இது எப்படி இருக்கும்னா audit change report அப்படின்னு ஒன்று இருக்கும். So நீங்க அந்த change report generate பண்ணீங்கன்னா it will say இந்த ப்ராடக்ட்டுக்கு இந்த price 100ல இருந்து 110க்கு மாத்தி இருக்கும். That's one log. It was done by so and so on this date from this particular access ID. Now again, this is all not going to be easy for a client. It's not going to be cheap also, but some other things that you can also work on is to even help your client identify suitable applications. Ana idella just 1 minute. So another thing you have to be very careful in all this is some activities you're not supposed to do as a statutory auditor. And you should ensure that this does not get hit by the provisions of 138. Again, please be a little careful about it. So that's all I can say. You should not render conflicting services to a particular client. But just this, I think, presents an opportunity. Please reach out to clients in Tirupur, see how you can help them. Why Tirupur? Anywhere for that matter. Then we come to auditors' rules. Now, as I had mentioned before, amendment to this particular change, only for this, there is a deferral to April 1, 2022. But I am told the Accounting Standards Board or one of the boards of ICAI has clarified that it is not applicable for this year. So in any case, it's only a reporting clause. So it really doesn't matter. Then amendment to auditors' rules. So amendment to Rule 11 of the company's Audit and Auditors rules. Again, it came on March 24, 2021. The first rule was very, very simple. Whether the disclosures regarding specified bank notes omit பண்ணிட்டாங்க. So it has been omitted. Now, the second and the third are very important. They're important because your client has to be very careful in all these matters this year itself. ஏன்னா இன்னொரு யூஷுவல் இது என்னன்னா நம்ம என்ன இதே டீட்டெயில வந்து ஷெட்யூல் 3ல கொடுக்க சொல்றாங்க. நம்ம என்ன டீட்டெயில் கொடுத்தாலும் நம்ம போன வருஷத்து கம்பேரிட்டிவ்ஸ் ஆல்சோ we give. Now, I have two options. I can either deal with this here or later. I would prefer to deal with this here. Now, there are two rules. Rule 11(1), 2. Rule 3, Rule 3 of 11ல என்ன சொல்றாங்கன்னா, Rule 1 and 2ல கொடுத்திருக்கிறத மேனேஜ்மெண்ட் கரெக்டா கொடுத்திருக்காங்களா? That's it. So, the auditor's amendment rule says it wants the management to report and represent on two matters, and it only wants the auditor to confirm that the management is represented correctly. So what is that clause? Let's read this. Now first அந்த வெறும் போல்ட்ல இருக்கிறத மட்டும் படிக்கிறேன். அதுக்கு அப்புறமா we'll read it, but this could be very, very important. And I will also tell you why it has come. Whether the management has represented. So first of all, நம்மளுக்கு representation தான் இது. அப்படின்னா எங்க இருக்கணும்? Notes and accountsல இருக்கணும். இதனோட corresponding change எங்க பண்ணிருக்காங்க? Schedule 3ல பண்ணிட்டாங்க. So whether the management has represented that other than as disclosed in the accounts. So you have to first disclose in the accounts. No funds. So it uses the term generally. So unga client has not advanced, loaned or invested. Abdina enna, your client could not have given a loan or an advance or invested in the share capital of any other person. So no loans have been advanced, funded or invested by the company. Okay. To whom? To any person. How? With the understanding. So your company is A gives it to B with the understanding. Agreement irkalam, agreement illama irkalam, writing la irkalam, writing la illama irkalam. That the intermediary, yaru paisa vaangravanga is the intermediary. Company B will give it to somebody else, will lend or invest in other persons. C. For whom? For A. So A has, let's say, taken a bank loan of 100 crores. And this is a practical situation that I'm talking about when you look at the cases that come to insolvency. Now, our bank la poite 50 kodi vaangirpen. 50 kodi vaangi, என்னோட இன்னொரு sister concern. The sister concern is very, very wide. So I would have given it to a sister concern. And what would have I given? I would have given 40 crores. 40 crores கூட பாத்தீங்கன்னா 2 crores அவங்களோட ஷேர் கேபிட்டல் நம்ம 38 கோடி பிரீமியம் கொடுத்துட்டோமா? That is company B. Company B தான் இன்டர்மீடியரி. Company B என்ன பண்ணுவாங்க? யாராவது ஒரு டைரக்டருக்கு பர்சனலா ஒரு லோன் கொடுத்து அந்த டைரக்டர் போயிட்டு ஒரு வீடு வாங்கியிருப்பாரு, ஒரு கமர்ஷியல் ப்ராப்பர்ட்டி வாங்கியிருப்பாரு. யாருக்கு? For the benefit of A. Today A will say, sorry, I can't pay the bank loan. It's over. So this was actually a lot of movement of funds which they wanted to track. அதுதான் சொல்றாங்க. நீங்க நம்ம client, நம்ம audit பண்ற company is treated as the beneficiary, the ultimate beneficiary. The ultimate beneficiary has given funds to an intermediary who in turn gives it as lending or investment to somebody else, where the entire transaction, whether recorded in writing or otherwise, is for the benefit of the company. Now we can read what is other than the bold. management has represented that other than as disclosed in the accounts, no funds have been advanced, loaned, or invested by the company to any other person, entity, or foreign entities. So, இப்போ வந்து இந்த intercorporate இதெல்லாம் கிடையாது. That the intermediary shall directly or indirectly lend or invest in other persons or entities identified by the company. So the whole thing is where the company is the ultimate beneficiary or provide any guarantee, security, or the like on behalf of any ultimate beneficiary. Now the same thing they said, okay, you're the auditor of the lending company, the company which is giving money, the government wants you to be careful. They made the reverse also. They said, whether no funds have been received by me. So, இப்ப நீங்க தான் B company-யோட auditor. B has not received any money other than what is stated. See, today they are not saying you cannot give money. They are saying whatever money you are receiving or giving for the benefit of somebody else, you have to disclose it in Schedule 3. And the auditor has to comment on it. So similarly, they are saying here, no funds have been received by the company from any person. But that person is called as the funding party, correct? They are the people who are providing the funds. With the understanding, whether in writing or otherwise, that the company, which company B, will lend or invest in any other person or entity. That's it. So they have looked at both sides of a transaction and they said as an auditor, நம்மளோட செக் ஒன்னே ஒண்ணுதான். இருக்கிற டிரான்சாக்ஷனை மேனேஜ்மெண்ட் ஹஸ் டு கரெக்ட்லி ஷோ இட் இன் தி நோட்ஸ் ஆன் அக்கவுண்ட்ஸ். இத தவிர வேற டிரான்சாக்ஷன் எதுவும் இல்ல அப்படின்னு மேனேஜ்மெண்ட் ரெப்ரசென்ட் பண்றாங்க. பட் இந்த ரெண்டு கிளாஸுக்கு நம்ம என்ன பண்ணணும்? Based on such audit procedures that the auditor has considered reasonable and appropriate, nothing has come to their notice that caused them to believe that the representations contain any material misstatement. இப்ப நீங்க ஒரு கம்பெனி ஆடிட் பண்றீங்க. இந்த கம்பெனி வந்து கம்பெனி பிக்கு கொடுத்திருக்காங்க. கம்பெனி பிக்கு கொடுத்தத they have put it in the notes on accounts. Now this company has also given it to company C, but they have not put it in the notes on accounts. It becomes your responsibility. So if a C க்கு கொடுத்தது is materially misstated. The company had 50 crores of which they gave 40 crores to somebody and 10 crores to somebody. 40 crores they reported, 10 crores they did not report. The next one is pretty vanilla. Dividend declared or paid is in compliance with section 123 of the Companies Act. It's a straight compliance. Then the same thing which was there, they are repeating it here. So first நம்ம என்ன பார்த்தோம்னா management responsibility, accounts rules. Accounts who has to maintain? Management has to maintain. Second, we came to audit rules. Audit rules, who has to comply? Auditor has to comply. So the same thing, accounting software for maintaining books of accounts. And in my view, this was long overdue in India because there has been so much of alteration. And நம்ம client வந்து நம்ம எல்லா வேலையும் முடிச்சிட்டு போயிட்டு டிபியை மாத்திட்டாங்கன்னா, see, some of us may have taken a trial balance copy, அதை certify பண்ணி எல்லாம் we may not have received it. I think a lot of these clauses are also extensive protection to the auditors ourselves. So இதே வந்து whether the company has used such accounting software which has a feature of recording audit trail and the same has been operated throughout the year for all transactions and the audit trail has not been tampered with and the audit trail has been preserved as per the statutory record. So அவங்க என்ன சொல்றாங்கன்னா அந்த அங்கே பார்க்கும்போது they said you must have an audit trail, it cannot be disabled. இங்க ஆடிட்டர் கிட்ட வரும்போது they are talking about preservation. They are saying அந்த audit trailயும் அந்த audit log reportையும் change log reportையும் you need to maintain for 8 years. So that's the essence of the auditor's amendment rule. Now both these, I think especially these two clauses, we have to be very careful. இதுக்கு வந்து what's very important is, இப்போ ஒரு கம்பெனிக்கு கேஷ் ஃப்ளோ மேண்டேட்டரி இல்லைன்னா கூட நீங்க எதுக்கும் ஒரு கேஷ் ஃப்ளோ ஸ்டேட்மெண்ட் போட்டுடுங்க. That will be very helpful for you to know what is the fund income which has come in and what is the fund that has gone out. Because unlike your your balance sheet and your P&L, your cash flows tell you a much better story. Now we come to the most important part of the presentation, which is the Schedule 3 changes. See, it's a matter of this year, next year, etc. But it is here to stay. And the changes are huge. So I'll try and walk you through one by one, whatever are these changes. So general change idella. Compulsory rounding of figures. Turnover and Ravarthaya, they have substituted as total income. Tangible assets, they are now calling it as property, plant and equipment. Statement of profit and loss, the total income and not total revenue. Very simple. Just to start with, lighter and the madri. Share capital. முன்னாடி schedule 3 ல நம்ம more than 5% holding தான் report பண்ணிட்டு இருந்தோம் last year this year. இப்போ they want you to disclose shareholding of promoters also. And the promoter means promoter as defined in Companies Act 2013. So at the end of this presentation, I will take you to that MCA ebook. I don't know how many of you use it. I use it very extensively and it's really useful when you're doing any work. Separately for each class of shares, preference, equity, tanidaniya katranga. Percentage change also needs to be reported. So today, if you ask me, okay, I think இத அவங்க annual returnலயே வச்சிருக்கலாம். They could have added it to the annual return and made our life simple. Instead, they have brought it here. I don't understand why they've brought it here. But I think on the face of the balance sheet, maybe it's also to help the bankers, etc. They get to see everything in the balance sheet itself. So one thing I'm able to see is a lot more. So in the Companies Act oda evolution ebrina, first they brought in something. Then they said you must comply. Second stage where they, after things settle down. Now we've come to the third stage. Not only should you comply, you must comply and disclose. Same thing with CSR. They first brought it like one happy provision. They said, spend pannunga. Then they said, spend pannalena sollunga. Inniki you have to spend, you have to monitor. CSR la ebrina, you not only have to spend and monitor, you have to have a committee that will say, yes, for certain value of projects, nejamave and the beneficiary ki benefit irundhudu. So they really want to get into the skin of things. If you look at Schedule 3. Short-term borrowing, இது ஒரு சின்ன reclassification தான். முன்னாடி current maturity of long-term debt. இப்போ நம்ம SBI ல கடன் வாங்கி இப்போ currently இப்போ pay பண்ண வேண்டியது we would have put it in the other current liabilities. They now want us to show it separately in short-term borrowings itself. I think this is a welcome disclosure because it's logical. Borrowings kadila borrowings katradana, it will be logical instead of showing it under other current liabilities. Trade payables aging. So this is again very, very interesting. In fact, even when Caro came, I kept saying this. See, namma as an auditor, solvency was always our problem. Correct? Whether my client is solvent, assets, liabilities. But somehow after this ILFS happened, there's been a lot of confusion. It's today, somewhere along the line, the auditor is also required to comment on liquidity. In the Carvala, which is again deferred by a year, they are saying the auditor has to comment whether based on what management estimates have been provided, I don't remember the exact words, but they say whether the company's short-term assets are enough to cover the short-term liabilities. How can anybody say, especially during this COVID? So on the context, trade payables aging எல்லாம் கேக்குறாங்க. See, முன்னாடி நம்ம trial balance group பண்ணி ஒரு balance sheet கொடுப்போம். இப்போ they want us to go. So trial balance last level accounts. அது வேண்டாம். Thankfully, the government does not want it. இல்ல Red Bus மாதிரி அவங்க ஒரு software போட்டு அதை கூட எடுத்துக்கலாம். But second level, இந்த மாதிரி classification aging, இப்போ நம்ம tally trial balanceல இருந்து வரக்கூடிய some reports they are asking. So they want the trade payables aging schedule. இதுல first partல I don't see a பிரச்சனை. MSME, less than 1 year, 1 to 2 years, 2 to 3 years, more than 3 years total. Others. Disputed dues MSME எவ்வளோ? Disputed dues எவ்வளோ? So அவங்க என்ன சொல்றாங்கன்னா disputed, undisputed தனித்தனியா காட்டிடுங்க. இதை வச்சு again a bank will be able to just see right through. இப்போ நம்ம client வந்து suppose ஒரு டெபிட் நோட் பாஸ் பண்றாருன்னு வச்சுக்கோங்க. ஏஜிங் மாறும்ல, மாறலாம் டேலில. இப்போ எனக்கு ஒரு கிரெடிட் பேலன்ஸ் இருக்கு, அதுக்கு நான் ஒரு டெபிட் நோட் அண்ட் ஒரு கிரெடிட் நோட் இன்னைக்கே போட்டேன்னா if my aging changes, that is why they are talking about audit logs. அந்த ஆடிட் லாக்ஸ்ல வெளில வந்துரும். இந்த மாதிரி இதே கஸ்டமர் அக்கவுண்ட்ல ஒரு கிரெடிட் நோட் டெபிட் நோட் ரெண்டுமே ஒரே நாள் பாஸ் பண்ணிருக்காங்க. Of course I'm not a tally expert and I don't know whether if you pass a debit note the aging will change, but they are asking for all this. Now I'm not bothered about this part. Similar information shall be given where no due date of payment is specified. So இப்போ என்ன சொல்றாங்கன்னா சில சப்ளையருக்கு வந்து நம்மளுக்கு கிரெடிட் பீரியடே இருக்காது. First வந்து due date of payment. If I have 45 days credit period, it is 45 days after my date of invoice only I will pay. இப்போ நம்ம வந்து எனக்கு கிரெடிட் பீரியடே இல்ல அப்படின்னு யாராவது சொல்லலாம்ன்றதுனால they have given this rider. Where no due date of payment is specified, disclosure shall be from the date of the transaction itself. It will be treated as payable on demand. See the last part. Unbilled dues shall be disclosed separately. அப்படின்னா என்ன? உங்க supplier has not given a bill. அதையும் they want நம்ம provisions அப்படின்னு எடுத்துப்போம் இல்லையா, liabilities. That also shall be disclosed separately. So all this is now going to call for a lot of customization that somebody has to get ready for. Tangible assets, only one change. Again, change is also there in Caro. So now it seems like the Schedule 3 amendments to a certain extent are required for Caro alignment. ஏன்னா முன்னாடி நம்ம என்ன சொல்லிட்டு இருந்தோம்னா காரோல எல்லாம் கேக்குறீங்க, அத மேனேஜ்மெண்ட் சொல்லவே இல்லையே அப்படின்னு Schedule 3ல. So இப்போ என்ன சொன்னாங்கன்னா okay, now இது எல்லாத்தையும் we'll bring it in Schedule 3. There's one inclusion, amount of change due to revaluation if change is 10% or more in the aggregate of the net carrying value of each class of property and equipment. Another very important thing, whenever your client does anything like a revaluation, valuation, sale, etc., such valuations under the Companies Act have to be done only by registered valuers. Please make sure that they are registered with the IBBI. Intangible assets, the same change. Amount of change due to revaluation if change is 10% or more in the aggregate of the net carrying value of each class in சொல்லிட்டாங்க இங்கேயும். Each class, land more than 10%. So we can't, இப்போ நீங்க இன்னொரு smaller asset, ஒரு building was a small asset, அதுல 10% மேல போனா அதை தனியா காட்டணும். அந்த மாதிரி it's come. Again, a similar thing has got reflected in this inventory changes in Caro. In fact, I think more than Schedule 3, Caro is looking very large to me when it comes next year. Because your client has to comply with Caro this year. இப்போ காரோல என்ன சொல்லிருக்காங்கன்னா physical verification of inventory பண்ணும்போது each categoryல எனக்கு ஸ்டோர்ஸ் ரொம்ப கம்மியா இருக்கலாம், ஆனா ஸ்டோர்ஸ்ல வேரியன்ஸ் இருந்ததுன்னா அதை தனியா காட்டணும். And in each class. Intangible assets, pretty much the same change. Long-term loans and advances. This is again an easy one. ரொம்ப simple reclassification. Security deposit வந்து long-term loans and advances லேந்து they brought it to other current assets. Correct தான். So a deposit is not in the nature of a loan or an advance. Other current assets. அதுல வந்து they've said trade receivables outstanding. இது other current assetsல இருக்கிற trade receivable. So அதே மாதிரி disputed, non-disputed, considered good, considered doubtful. முன்னாடி நம்ம என்ன சொல்லுவோம்? More than 180 days, less than 180 days, considered good, considered doubtful. இப்போ additionally we have to say after the existing reporting up to 3, fourth clause is being introduced. I've shown that on the left side. Good, disputed, undisputed, good, doubtful, you have to show separately. Again, this is a brilliant one. Unbilled dues again shall be disclosed separately. So in the construction contract la enna agum? Client வந்து வேற மாதிரி பே பண்ணுவாங்க. ரெவென்யூ we recognize based on another our standards parameter, right? So percentage completion அந்த மாதிரி cases if there are unbilled dues also which are coming in such contracts, or very simply you finished your work but you have not raised a bill, they want you to put that also in this aging. அதே மாதிரி நீங்க கஸ்டமருக்கு கொடுக்கிற பில்லுல if your client is not giving a credit period, then it will be from the date of the transaction. You will count whether it is 6 months or 1 year or 2 years, etc. On this, yeah, 1 to 2 years, 2 to 3 years, more than 3 years total. Next was the change in trade receivables. Pretty much the same thing. Whatever is there in the trade receivable, disputed, undisputed, considered good, considered doubtful, to be shown separately. Next is bank borrowings. But only one good thing is, idella schedule 3 la kondu vandatnala, for us the client has to make that statement. So it's not that the client can say, oh, I never gave this information. Today the information has come. Where the company has not used the banks, borrowings from banks and financial institutions for the specific purpose for which it was taken at the balance sheet date, the company shall disclose the details of where they have been used. Very, very important. Which means end use monitoring. Now, everybody says, yeah, I was complying. Today they are saying, please write down. So I told you, right? First one, the provision under the Companies Act. Following the provision was the compliance. Today, third, they want the customer, the bank's customer, to report saying, I have complied. Now, what is audit? Expression of opinion on financial statements, correct? True and fair, otherwise. Now, in that, it also includes all, நீங்க என்னெல்லாம் நம்ம செக் பண்றோம், P&L, balance sheet, cash flow, statement of changes in equity, plus notes on accounts, correct? So when we are certifying, we also have to look at this and say, yes, correct. இதுல நம்மளுக்கு என்ன அட்வான்டேஜ்னா, ஒரு client வந்து நம்ம கிட்ட கண்டிப்பா இந்த utilization statement கொடுக்கணும். And so it's a two-way check that they want to bring in. Intangible. If in the opinion of the board, any of the assets other than PPE, intangible and non-current investments, if they do not have a value on realization, so impairment, they want the board to cognize and report. So இதெல்லாம் வந்து existing MPL existing clause la vanda changes. Now those, if you thought these are bad, you have to actually go through the detail that's come in additional information, which is completely new. Again, if you notice, there is a marriage to Karo. Karola we had to say, right? If the title deeds are held in the name of the company, adukku inga corresponding inclusion aayirukku. Title deeds of immovable property not held in the name of the company. The company shall provide the details of all immovable property whose title deeds are not held in the name of the company in the format given below, and where such joint immovable property is jointly held with others, details are required to be given to the extent of company's share. Land, building, gross carrying value, title deeds yaar perla irukku, whether he's a promoter, director or a relative, property held since which date, reason for not being held in the name of the company. See, this is a bit vague because I have shown the land in the balance sheet, but the title deeds are not in the name of the company. If in a balance sheet land kaatlaina, you're not going to be bothered, correct? It says immovable property not held in the name of the company. If in schedule 3, which immovable property will you deal with? Only the immovable property which is sitting in your asset schedule, correct? If a promoter or a building vechittu we are paying rent abdina, it is not an asset of the company. This is only for assets of the company. And today they are asking for a reason for not being held in the name of the company. Also indicate if in dispute. Is there a dispute? In fact, I knew of one case where a company had recorded, a hospital had recorded the land and building in their name, but it was actually held in the name of the promoter because that particular property was allotted to only doctors in that particular year. And this doctor took the property in his name and then he created a hospital. So it turned out to be a fairly complex legal matter actually. Second, where the company has revalued, the company shall disclose whether the revaluation is based on valuation by a registered valuer. Very important. So when they give you a valuation report for revaluation, please check whether it's from a registered valuer. The following disclosures, again, they just want data. I mean, it's just clean or bad or dirty data, whatever it is. This is where we stand. Following disclosures shall be made where loans or advances in the nature of loans, advances in the nature of loans are granted to whom? Promoter, director, KMP, related parties, severally, jointly with any other person. So it's like, we used to play this monopoly trade along. It will or on the cuttam photo, or if you put your dice and it comes to 1 point, it will say go to jail, go directly to jail, do not cross go, do not collect 200. And the madri. If somebody can't say no, I have given it to an unrelated party 90%, but only 10% I've given to a related party. No. Anything where a promoter, a director, a KMP, or a related party you have given, which are repayable on demand or without specifying any terms of repayment. So, only this. See, under 185, if you have given it to some related party, no problem. Anna, is it repayable on demand or without specifying any term? On the cases you will have to disclose here. It's not all. Right? It's only for these two conditions. So, Adila, what is the government trying to do? The government is trying to force. They're trying to force people to get into only structured advance agreements where நம்ம லோன் ஒரு டைரக்டருக்கு கொடுக்குறோமா இல்ல ஒரு டைரக்டர் ஃபர்ஸ்ட் ஆஃப் ஆல் டைரக்டருக்கு கொடுக்கவே முடியாது ஏன்னா 185ல it is barred, but let us assume we give it to a company in which a director is interested. So this will attract, this has both cases, so it will all come out in the open. So this is what this does. KMP க்கும் சொல்லிட்டாங்க. So it'll have the KMP or a housing loan. A managing director or housing loan, it will have to come in here. Because again, it will help the government to decide, okay, this person's taken 50 crores from the bank, 45 crores is given it only to these parties. They will be able to sense a red flag. See here also, percentage of the total loans and advances in the nature of loans. Next is CWIP aging schedule. Again, there's a very interesting story to it. A lot of people who get money from the banks, the amount will be sitting in CWIP. As an auditor, the capitalized agumbodhu we look at it. But I know of companies for 10, 12 years. There are capital work in progress in some vague place in Jaipur. That equipment and all is mandla podanje, it's almost like antique now, fossilized. So the government says, look, tell me, you've taken money, please tell me. Now, one question somebody could have logically asked, why bring all this in Schedule 3? இதுக்கு எல்லாம் பதிலா எல்லாம் அந்த NGT7 annual returnல போட்டு they could have uploaded. But for whatever thing, so again another thing. While a lot of people think that the government is anti-auditors, I don't think so. Look at it finally. This is a land in which your credit rating agencies failed. Which is big. The bankers have not been exactly the wisest of people when we are seeing such collapses and talks of creation of a bad bank. We've had issues everywhere. Today, income tax, why should it move to e-assessment? So, there's nothing much for me to say. But I think the government still has a lot of hope in the audit profession as being the last bastion of trust and integrity. And I genuinely, even when I look at other cases where the auditors have failed, it's never been due to a collusion. It's more or less always been maybe slight negligence or sorry, number client he needs. But today I think you need to take a very different value proposition. You have to be very skeptical. Correct na correct, illa na illa. You want me to be your auditor? These are the benchmarks. So similarly, capital aging schedule, CWIP aging schedule. Again, another interesting thing is, இப்போ நம்ம கிளையண்ட் எல்லாம் வந்து இப்போவே அந்த CWIP எடுத்து லிஸ்ட் போட்டு டேட் எல்லாம் கண்டுபிடிச்சு வச்சாதான் அடுத்த வருஷத்துக்கு கரெக்டா they'll be able to give us the schedule. So aging also has to come in somewhere. For CWIP whose cost is overdue or exceeded. Now again, for a small company, I don't know why this was important, but look at these large companies. In fact, one thing I found very true of the banking system. If somebody's taken a 1 crore, 2 crore loan, they really go after them, surface, see this, that, invocation, they get the money. But where it's 100, 200 crores, we don't know how recoveries are happening, and there are really no published statistics on recoveries. So maybe this is one way where the government will actually get to all that. Now, a lot of the cases also, there are genuine project failures. ஏதாவது ஒரு கோல் லிங்கேஜ் வந்திருக்காது, ஒரு வழி கிடைச்சிருக்காது for a railway siding. So they say, okay, please tell me where completion is overdue or has exceeded its cost compared to its original plan. இப்போ இந்த பெரிய கம்பெனிஸ்ல தான் they'll have a capital budgeting and all that. But இப்போ நம்ம ஆடிட் பண்ற எல்லா கம்பெனிக்கும் CWIP இருந்ததுன்னா you need to have some original plan. So ensure that it is done. See, I don't see, in my view, no, this really small companies, 90% not applicable. பிரச்சனையே வராது. ரொம்ப பெரிய கம்பெனில anyway they will have systems and processes for all this. Most of us will get stuck. People who are operating with this mid-sized clients where there is money being spent, but they don't have wherewithal to collect this information. And very interesting, I don't know whether I've mentioned this before. MCA has, anyway, I'll be coming to it, so I'll come to that point later. But here they are saying where there is a cost overrun or a time overrun. Completion is overdue na time overrun, or has exceeded its cost அப்படின்னா cost overrun, it shall be given. என்னெல்லாம் கேக்குறாங்க? Project 1, Project 2, Project 3, Project 4, less than 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, more than 3 years. என்ன கேக்குறாங்க? ஏஜிங் கேட்கல, நீங்க எப்போ முடிப்பீங்க அப்படின்னு கேக்குறாங்க. The following CWIP completion schedule shall be given. Project 1, factory building at Trinelveli. I will finish it in 2 years. அதுல அமௌண்ட் வேற கேக்குறாங்க. I presume the amount they are asking is the amount in capital work in progress. So let's say I have capital work in progress of 15 crores. There are 3 projects. 10, 2.5, 2.5. You will put 10 in one bucket. Factory at Trinelveli. Inga vande site at Tirupur, 2.5 crores. You have to put it. Now, additionally, they want you to give details of projects where activity has been suspended, shall be given separately. இப்போ இங்கே கொடுத்துட்டு அங்க இம்பேர் பண்ணலனா there will be a problem. So you may have to take a provision for CWIP impairment. Similarly, a company has taken 30 crores loan, 10 crores loan, intangible. I'm building a software. I'm building a product. I'm building a minimum viable product, something. So, ingayum they are saying, just because it's intangible, it's not that we won't question you. We will also ask you, what is the project in progress? What is project temporarily suspended? Amount in CWIP. Again, no, this is why I feel sometimes the drafting can be better. Inge alaga amount in CWIP அப்படின்னு போட்டாங்க. இங்கேயும் அதை போட்டிருக்கலாம். Maybe this is what they meant, CWIP. But it's primarily the CWIP amount that gets disclosed. So total shall tally with the amount of intangible assets under development in the balance sheet. அதே மாதிரி இங்க total shall tally with the total of CWIP in the balance sheet. அது இங்க எழுதல அவங்க. Details of Benami property held. Okay, I think this is whether only cases where proceedings have been initiated or pending against the company for holding any Benami properties under the Benami Transaction Prohibition Act. You have to give the details of such property, amount thereof, beneficiary. இதுக்கெல்லாம் வந்து நம்மளால ஒன்னும் ரொம்ப எல்லாம் பண்ண முடியாது. Client has to give a representation letter. Benami property மேல ஏதாவது proceeding initiate ஆயிருக்கா இல்லையா? That's it. Willful defaulter. This is a slightly easy one. If you go and put your client name and put willful defaulter, if they are there as a willful defaulter, it comes in the public domain. Where a company is declared as a willful defaulter by any bank or financial institution or other lender, the following details shall be given. Date of declaration as a willful defaulter, details of defaults. Who is a willful defaulter? A person or an issuer who is categorized as a willful defaulter. This one is, I don't know how they thought through this whole thing, but very, very relevant. And this is something I've also been speaking in my other programs. See, NCA on the give or take, I think, or 22 laksha company irukku, and it's growing. It's very interesting. In NCA website, reports no irukku. Adla poi pathingana indha maasam incorporate ana company ellam theriyum. Date wise irukum. And it will be given jurisdiction wise. Chennai level, Tamil Nadu level, Kerala level and the madri. Now I read somewhere in the public domain that they've actually struck off 5 lakh companies. Where they have not section 248, if you don't file your financial annual returns for I think X number of consecutive years, 3 years they go and strike off. But in the strike off லயும் என்ன பண்ணிருக்காங்கன்னா, யாருக்கெல்லாம் charge pending இருந்ததோ அந்த company எல்லாம் strike off ஆகல. So if you have a client who has not filed his returns for 3 years and he had no charge pending, he would have got struck off. If you look at your own client trial balance, a lot of companies will transactions may have happened with struck off companies. நம்மளுக்கே தெரியாது. Whether the company has any transactions with companies struck off, the company shall disclose in the following details. This is again from an insolvency perspective. I've seen a lot of cases like this. Company takes loan from a bank, gives it to an entity. That entity gives it to another entity. The entity to whom I gave money, company A gave money, has also got struck off. The company whom that company gave also got struck off. You will find this almost invariably in all these large real estate groups. What is happening? So the government said, இதெல்லாம் வந்து asset-ஆவே இருக்கும் balance sheet-ல. Sometimes as auditors, நம்ம அதை notice கூட பண்ணிருக்க மாட்டோம். So in fact, another very good big area to talk about is shell companies. A lot of cases, நம்ம என்ன நினைப்போம், சின்ன client, okay, static balance sheet. என்ன இருக்குங்க? And the client also will say, what is there? Why should I give you a large fee? There is only one borrowing. There is only one loan I've given to somebody. No. Those are the companies which are at absolute risk today. Where the company has any transactions with companies struck off under section 248 of the Companies Act or 560 of the Companies Act 1956, the company shall disclose the following details. Name of the company. What is the type of transaction? நம்ம அந்த கம்பெனில இன்வெஸ்ட்மெண்ட் பண்ணிருக்கோமா? Do they have to give us money for sales, receivables, payables, shares held by the struck off company? So this is another very nice one I've noticed. I've noticed in one case of a company that I happened to review, one of my shareholders itself was struck off. And there's another very interesting thing. So if you just type shell companies, the internet will throw out a list of 16,700 shell companies in the country with PAN number. Now, 90% are based in east of India, which is West Bengal. Now, a lot of these transactions, again, why is the government interested in all this is because these shell companies are used to launder funds. Let's say there is some bribe money. Now, the bribe will obviously come in cash. How do you bring it into the banking system? It happens through these shell companies. So I will layer the money. I'll give 1 crore to 20 people. These 20 people will come in as shareholders. Now this company will then, enter into a sales contract or something like that. And after some time, it will get written off. In fact, sometimes when I audit some companies or look at some balance sheets, I keep thinking, you've invested 50 crores in a company, in a smaller entity. You're not even bothered whether he's paying you dividend, whether that investment is saleable today. Why would I do that? Especially when I have taken money as borrowing from a bank. So all I'm trying to tell you is maybe we don't audit such companies, but in a lot of the small companies that you're auditing, they could actually be these shell companies which are being used to route transactions. Please be careful. But I think the risk appears to be much lesser in the south than elsewhere. registration of charges, where any charges or satisfaction is yet to be registered with the registrar of companies beyond the statutory period, you will have to provide the details and the reasons thereof. Compliance with number of layers of company, 287, section 2 subsection 87 ஏற்கனவே சொல்லிட்டாங்க. Company வந்து cannot have more than 2 layers of subsidiaries அப்படின்னு. அதுல ஏதாவது இருந்ததுன்னா you have to report. Because today the government has no way of finding out. So unless it comes here. Now what we are all hoping is பழைய கம்பெனிஸ் ஆக்ட்ல இருந்த கம்பெனி எல்லாம் அப்படியே தான் இருக்கும். இந்த ரெஸ்ட்ரிக்ஷன் ஆன் லேயரே வந்து was a new clause. So in the case of non-compliance, you have to report. இதுல கூட பாத்தீங்கன்னா it's only where the company has not complied with the number of layers. The name and the sin of such companies shall be disclosed. This is what I said is the marriage with Caro again. Following ratios to be disclosed. Current ratio, debt equity ratio, debt service coverage ratio. அப்படின்னா என்ன? How much of cash flows do I have to pay my debt? And by debt, it is both interest and principal. There is a subset to this ratio. It is called interest service coverage ratio. That is whether I have cash flows enough to at least service my interest. Return on equity ratio, inventory turnover ratio, trade receivables turnover ratio, trade payables turnover ratio. இதெல்லாம் sales by. Net capital turnover ratio, net profit ratio, ROCE, ROI. The company shall explain the items included in numerator and denominator. It's going to become like one auditing textbook or an accounting textbook for computing the above ratios. Further, explanation shall be provided for any change in ratio by more than 25%. Sirs and madams attending this program, one thing I will tell you, this is increasing your audit effort by 3 times. Kindly sensitize your clients to a different fee level because this is actually real work. இப்போ further explanationலாம் நம்ம அவங்க சொல்லுவாங்க, we'll again have to confirm whether that explanation is correct because the information is sitting in schedule 3. Because number in audit, what do we do? Whether the financial statements have been prepared in accordance with the applicable reporting framework. Inge, what is my framework? Schedule 3. So every line in schedule 3, as an auditor, you are saying it is true, it is fair, it is not materially misstated. No, what is the next one? Compliance with approved schemes or of arrangements. If a Companies Act, there is something called as a compromise. Section 230 and 237. Just for academic interest, I'll tell you what it is. So if there is a compromise between members or members and creditors, the creditors and the company, they can go to NCLT and the bank, for example, will say, எனக்கு 30 கோடி வேண்டாம், எனக்கு 10-15 கோடி போறோம். So then you can go and say, okay, present a scheme of compromise and NCLT will approve that scheme of compromise. So if your company has entered into any such scheme or compromise, you have to report. ஏன்னா இப்ப என்சிஎல்டில ஆர்டர் பாஸ் பண்ணும்போது அவங்க என்ன சொல்லுவாங்கன்னா, அக்கௌண்டிங் ஸ்டாண்டர்ட் எல்லாம் கரெக்டா ட்ரீட் ஆயிருக்கணும், அந்த என்சிஎல்டி கொடுத்த கண்டிஷனை கன்ஃபார்ம் ஆயிருக்கா அப்படின்னு இங்க யூ வில் பி செக்கிங் அண்ட் ரிப்போர்ட்டிங். த மேனேஜ்மெண்ட் ஹஸ் டு ரிப்போர்ட். This is that part. Utilization of borrowed funds and share premium. Now I don't understand why when they're asking the auditor to report, they have not used this term, borrowed fund and share premium. They have only said any money, correct? But inge pathingana, it is coming under this heading. So these are some small dichotomies that we will address eventually when the institute gives a guidance note. But chuma, just for academic interest, you can compare and see. Where the company, this is the same thing. If you remember, we went through this in the audit rule, where a company has advanced or loaned or invested funds to any other person with the understanding that the intermediary shall directly or indirectly lend it or provide any guarantee. இந்த மாதிரி இருந்ததுன்னா, in the nature of transaction where the company is the ultimate beneficiary இருந்ததுனால் இதெல்லாம் டிஸ்க்ளோஸ் பண்ணணும். எவ்வளவு அமௌண்ட் கொடுத்தீங்க, எந்த இன்டர்மீடியரிக்கு கொடுத்தீங்க, எதற்காக கொடுத்தீங்க, அந்த இன்டர்மீடியரி இப்ப நீங்க தானே கொடுத்திருக்கீங்க, நீங்க தானே பெனிஃபிஷியரி, அப்ப அவங்க பைசா எங்க போட்டாங்கன்னு உங்களுக்கு தெரியணும். as the company, how much have they invested, where has the intermediary further advanced such money, date of the amount, security or like provided to or on behalf of the ultimate beneficiaries, declaration that the provisions of FEMA Companies Act have been complied with for such transactions. So if there is a section 185 violation, we were struggling no previously, நம்ம வந்து ஒரு சின்ன 185 violation ஏதாவது இருக்குன்னா எங்கெல்லாம் இருக்கணும், இங்கெல்லாம் வந்துரும். So ultimate beneficiaries, so declaration that the provisions of FEMA Companies Act have been complied. See, today as an auditor, you have to do basic audit, statutory audit, and the 143(1) enquiry பண்ணணும். அதுக்கப்புறமா இப்ப இந்த ஆடிட்டர்ஸ் ரூல்ஸ்ல வந்த புது மேட்டர் எல்லாம் பண்ணணும். என்னது, IEPF பார்க்கணும், மெட்டீரியல் பெண்டிங் லிட்டிகேஷன் பார்க்கணும், இன்னும் ஒரு one more clause was there, right? So the 3 clauses plus now next year onwards audit log பார்க்கணும். அதுக்கப்புறமா section 143 compliance you have to ensure. Beyond section 143(1), 143(3), then you have to do fraud reporting. Then you have to check Companies Act compliance, FEMA compliance. I think it's completely changing the audit context, which in my opinion, in my very humble opinion, certainly calls for a completely different relook at audit fees. That is my only request. Because எல்லா கிளையண்டும் வந்து நான் போன வருஷம் இவ்ளோ கொடுத்தேன், இந்த வருஷம் I think this is a circumstance where you have to do a zero base budget estimate to come up with a credible audit effort. அதே மாதிரி this is the reporting for the reverse, where the company has received any money for the benefit of for a funding party and has given it to somebody else. So that's about it. So amount received from the funding party, amount further advanced to intermediary beneficiaries, along with the intermediaries, they are asking you to disclose. Undisclosed income. This is another important one. Munalla, if there is some tax assessment and you're charged to extra tax, income escaping assessment, ஏதாவது இருந்ததுன்னா, we would just finish it there and just record the financial impact. இங்க என்ன சொல்றாங்க? The company shall give details of any transaction not recorded in the books of accounts that has been surrendered or disclosed as income during the year in the tax assessments under the Income Tax Act, unless there is immunity for disclosure under the scheme. So அது வந்து you will have to properly bring it and show it in your schedule 3. See, one thing is all these disclosures make a company highly unbankable. Very difficult to get a loan if you have issues in any of these. But how many bankers read all this? In fact, I have a completely contrarian view. The more information you put in a balance sheet, the less readable it becomes to a banker. Actually, they just, in my experience with the bankers, they just don't understand. Balance sheet, P&L, cash flow, notes on accounts, main auditor's report, CARO, ICOFER. இதெல்லாம் சேர்த்து for somebody to sort of absorb becomes very, very difficult. So I don't know. Personally, I feel it would have been much better had all this formed part of the annual return rather than a Schedule 3 change itself. But then we don't tell the government what to do. They tell us what to do. So CSR. So we had gone into CSR. So where the company covered under the 135 of the CSR, they are asking for straight away on the face of the balance sheet in your notes all this. Amount required to be spent. Amount incurred. How much is the shortfall? What is the total of the cumulative shortfall? எவ்வளோ? Reason என்ன? Nature of CSR activity என்ன? Details of related party transaction. நம்ம CSR பண்ண வேண்டிய கம்பெனியே அவங்க ஒரு ட்ரஸ்ட் வச்சு அவங்க ஸ்பெண்ட் பண்றாங்களா? Whether the provision is made with respect to a liability incurred by entering into a contractual obligation, the movements in provision should also be shown separately. cryptocurrency, virtual currency. If any transactions are there, profit and loss on account of such transactions and amount of currency held. The last part we come to. Does anybody have any questions till now? I think I've finished the presentation. I wouldn't want to do too much of CSR unless yeah. Any questions till now?
No, madam, no questions received in chat box.
Okay. Can I just take a 30-second break? 30 seconds.
Yes, madam.
Now I'll come to the last part on CSR. So if anybody wants any specific other changes, then if I know, I'll explain.
Madam, you gave an excellent presentation on the recent amendments in the Companies Act. I agree. But I feel there should be some small suggestions. One thing is we discussed about the audit trail regarding this, which has now been postponed to 31st March 2022. Regarding the audit trail, our concentration was mainly on the alteration of accounts on a later date. But this audit trail should apply even on the date on which the original entry has been put. Like who has put the entry, who has verified the entry, who has passed the entry, at what date the entry has been maintained in the electronic ledger, and at what time or something like that. All those things should be available even in the original electronic ledger itself. It doesn't mean only for transactions which have been altered later by virtue of a journal entry or anything like that. Even in the case of original entry itself, these things should be available, and the auditor should be able to verify who has passed the entry and who has entered the entry into the electronic ledger. That is my view regarding that.
100%, sir. Sir, namloda cases la the primary thing. So what is my building blocks of internal control, sir? My first building block is maker checker. Correct? There has to be a maker, there has to be a checker. Now my checker can be manual. There is a tally la vande entry podraru, he is the maker. But voucher eduthu kayethu podrom. So adanala da checker is complete. Illana it's not even a complete internal control. Now unless you have a software which stamps every transaction should get stamped at source.
But the present day tally doesn't contain the details regarding who has entered the entry inside the ledger, electronic ledger, who has passed that entry into that electronic ledger, at what date it has been entered. All those things are not available in the present day tally. They are not asking for those things.
Correct, sir. The point என்னன்னா அப்படி இருக்கிறதுனால தான் tally became very popular. Every other இப்போ வந்து issue என்னன்னா, see, today Tally also is a big organization. They will have to come up with a solution for this. Because everybody can't just dismount Tally. But if your client is a public interest entity and you feel it may not actually You can't wait for it to happen. And operations are quite extensive now. Please start helping them to look at alternates today.
And one more thing, madam, as you rightly said, the auditors are not computer specialists. They cannot go and see whether the software contain all those details. If the auditor gets a certificate from the customer or from the software supplier that the software contains all the details what are required under the Companies Act, then will it be safe? Will it safeguard the auditor as far as his report is concerned?
No, sir. I'll tell you why. For two specific reasons. One, this is a specific item to be reported in your audit report itself.
But we don't know what is in the software because we
Yes,
are
sir.
not
So,
specialists.
supplier, I will rephrase your solution. Your solution was to get a management representation or a supplier representation.
Both we can get, no problem. The
I will
management,
substitute it by saying,
we should ask the management should get to get the representation from the software supplier even at the time of installing the software that itself, that the software contains all those details that are required under the Companies Act 2013 by virtue of such and such. Like a certificate, if they get it, and if you can get a certificate, copy of the certificate from the client, as well as a representation from the board itself, from the company itself, that is the software which has been contains all the details required under the Companies Act and other things. Can we say in our report that as per the reports given by the software supplier and the management, we certify that the company does not have so like that? We can narrate our certificate like that based on the certificates given by the software supplier as well as the customer. Why not we base our report on it and say like that?
you cannot, sir.
Simply saying that it has got audit trail and all, because we don't know whether it has got audit trail or not. So simply not saying it contains audit trail and all, we can say that on the basis of the certificate given by the supplier and on the basis of the certificate given by the customer, we certify that the software contains audit trail and other things. Like that we can always say.
So if you're done, sir, I'll tell you one small thing, sir. Here, if you can get an information systems auditor to do exactly what you're saying, then as an auditor, you have used the work of an expert. So you need, if you feel you don't have the specialist skill and your client is very large and you don't want to do that, ask somebody who's a DISA to do this work and give you a certificate. That is acceptable. Point number one. Secondly, sir, இப்போ வந்து நம்ம அவங்க சொல்றதை if we are willing to take, then the logical thing will be management is also saying financial statement correct and கையெழுத்து போடுறாங்க, அப்ப நம்ம audit process itself will not be relevant. No, sir. So here you can trust, but you should verify. You can verify by yourself, or the standard permits you to use the work of an expert. It permits you to use the work of another audit, any specialist you want. Now this brings you to the third element. So now you take a slightly large firm auditing a very large company. That partner who's handling the statutory audit does not know anything, sir. He will bring one more partner who will do the IT testing. So we will need to build that network to get people to assist us to certify. But no, to answer your question, a management representation that I have done everything correct will not absolve you of the audit responsibility. Secondly, sir, நீங்க எப்படி சார் ஐகோஃபர்ல நான் ட்ரூ அண்ட் ஃபேர்னு சொன்னீங்க? அப்பவே நம்ம சொல்லிருக்க கூடாது இல்ல? One of the essential elements of internal control is for a transaction to get stamped correctly. No, sir.
I beg to differ here, madam. Reporting as true and fair is only with respect to the results of the financial statements what we have given. Actual maintenance of account is something different. That doesn't come under the
ஐகோஃபர்ல வருது இல்லையா சார்? ஐகோஃபர்ல வருது இல்லையா? Why ICOFER? Even in your primary SA 700, you say management's responsibilities for this, maintenance of controls, etc., etc. Everything is there. So, but yes, sir. But my humble suggestion to you is get a specialist if you think it is necessary. Two, if you think you cannot live with the current accounting system, tell that to your client right away. But I also feel in some part Tally might themselves come up with a patch or something. They can't be without doing it. Those are my three responses.
Thanks, madam. And
regarding very good point.
Regarding this schedule 3 amendments that has come, I got a few small doubts. Can I go through or
Sure,
we'll
sir.
discuss it
Sure, sir.
later?
Please, sir.
The first one is regarding this rounding up less than 100 crore rupees and more than 100 crore rupees. The less than 100 crore rupees, I should round it up to the nearest 100,000 or something like that. And more than 100 crore rupees, I should round it up to the nearest lakhs, millions or something like that. If my turnover is more than 100 crores, then does it mean that I should not round it up to the nearest 100? Will it
No,
be
sir,
wrong?
it's only an option. You give whatever you want to give, sir. It's still fine.
It's still fine. Now, then does it
Absolutely.
mean that?
நீங்க full value கூட கொடுக்கலாம். எதுக்கு நீங்க full, I mean, I don't think that's a concern.
And does it mean that I can even now go through as such full figure? I can give it like that.
Yeah, I presume so. I have seen several companies giving full figures. But
That
sir,
is-
I will read this once again and I'll clarify this to you, sir. I'll take your mail ID from KCS, sir. I will respond to you on this separately. Not encountered the
I can
situation.
always get it from our Tirupur branch now. And regarding this notes on share of capital, they are talking about the promoter's name and other things. I agree. That's a right thing that will be done. I agree. But there are 3 types of promoters which have been defined under section 269 of the Act. Number 1 is the person who has been named as a promoter in the prospectus or has been named in the so that is number 1 category. Number 2 category, the person on whose directions the board is accustomed to act or something like that. So there are different categories of promoters are there. Why not we also add a class here? That which class 269 1 or 2 or 3, which class, under which class he is coming as a promoter?
Sir, if I were to answer your question, sir, every promoter, every person who has been defined under section 269 has to come in here. Now, my concern on this, and for the benefit of the members, 269 covers 3 categories of people, sir. 1, a person who's named in the prospectus or identified in the annual return. That is easy, sir. Annual return la நம்ம போடுற பேரு or prospectus. Second, a person who has control of the affairs of the company, directly or indirectly, whether as a shareholder, a director, or otherwise. I'm actually coming one step slightly deeper to your question, sir. இது கூட easy, sir. அவர் கண்ட்ரோல் பண்றாரா, அவர் ஷேர்ஹோல்டரா, டைரக்டரா, அதர்வைஸ் வேற சொல்றாங்க. ஷேர்ஹோல்டர் டைரக்டரா இல்லாம ஒரு டைரக்டரோட ஹஸ்பண்டா இருந்து கண்ட்ரோல் பண்ண முடியும். So that's your second problem here. The third problem is the toughest problem. A person, a promoter also means a person in accordance with whose advice, directions, or instructions the board of directors of the company is accustomed to act. It's very common, no sir. நீங்க பாத்தீங்கன்னா நம்ம ஒரு சின்ன வவுச்சர் வாங்குறது கூட they'll say, okay, we have to talk to sir. And sir யாருன்னா சார் எங்க கம்பெனில ஷேர் ஹோல்டரா இருக்க மாட்டாரு, டைரக்டராவும் இருக்க மாட்டாரு, but he'll be sitting on the 5th floor of a white building, white veshti, he'll be controlling. Now you have a very large challenge here because நீங்க வந்து first இதுக்கு நீங்க சொன்ன லாஜிக் ரொம்ப கரெக்ட். You can take a representation from the client saying that these are parties covered under that 269(1). இதுதான் 269(2), 269(3), none. Inga, you will take a representation from the client and then check for the disclosure.
Thanks, madam. Regarding the notes on trade payables, I agree that the age-wise classification can be given, and regarding MSMI and all others and other things. But regarding MSMI, you know, whether the other company, the supplier is an MSMI or not, we should only believe on the certificate given by the supplier whether he is MSMI or not. We do not know. Even our own assessee will not, our own client will not know whether he is MSMI or not. It is only the supplier who should say that I am only MSMI. So how can we say it is right or wrong?
Correct. Sir, அதுக்கு ஒரு ரொம்ப simple solution, sir. உங்க client வந்து April of every year or let's say September of every year or even December of every year யாருக்கெல்லாம் பேமெண்ட் பண்றாங்க, மெட்டீரியல் வாங்குறாங்கன்னு லிஸ்ட் எடுத்து அவங்களுக்கு எல்லாம் ஒரு லெட்டர் அனுப்பிச்சிருவாங்க. Are you an MSME? Tell me.
We believe only the statement given by the supplier. We do not know actually whether he is an MSMI or not.
தேவையில்லை, sir. தேவையில்லை. ஏன்னா அவங்க வந்து நீங்க கொடுக்கும் போது that letter will say if you are an MSME please provide me your MSME number.
அப்போ நம்ம இந்த ஸ்டேட்மெண்ட்ல இங்க நம்ம ஷெட்யூல் 3ல கொடுக்கும்போது எம்எஸ்எம்ஏன்னு போட்டு அங்க ஒரு ஸ்டார் வச்சுட்டு கீழே on the basis of the representations received from such companies னு போட்டோம்னாக்க we are safe and secure because we are also certifying this.
Yes sir, but there is also slightly larger responsibility there. If you are dealing with somebody, you can't say I don't know whether he is an MSME or not. No sir, we should talk equity also. No, see, நான் ஒரு சப்ளையரோட டீல் பண்றேன், அவர் MSME இருக்காரா இல்லையான்னு எனக்கு தெரியல அப்படின்றது is not legally it will be very difficult, because if he is an MSME, the law casts upon you the responsibility to pay on time. So since the compliance is the burden of the company, we in auditors illa sir, company has to have a reasonably good database. Adhilum neenga eppadi paakalam sir, top 80% of the purchases anyway are going to come from only 20% of the vendors. In the 20% of the vendors யாவது கரெக்டா MSME இல்லையான்னு we can check. ஆனா இப்போ அந்த ரிவைஸ்ட் MSME டைரக்ஷன்ஸ் எல்லாம் பார்த்தா நிறைய பேர் MSME வர வாய்ப்பு இருக்கு சார்.
இப்போ நம்ம அந்த பேன் கார்டுலாம் நமக்கு எல்லாருக்கும் இஷ்யூ பண்ணியிருக்கான், ஆதார் கார்டு எல்லாருக்கும் இஷ்யூ பண்ணியிருக்கான், ஜிஎஸ்டி எல்லாருக்கும் சப்ளை பண்ணியிருக்கான். we are getting this GST number, PAN number, etc. from all the suppliers. அவங்க கிட்ட இருந்து அந்த கார்டை வாங்குறோம், கார்டோட காப்பி வாங்குறோம், something like that we are having in our database and we are having it. Similarly, for MSI also, government should come forward with some certificate or something like that, which a copy of which we can store in our files and say that it is MSMI.
Correct. Or it's very simply MSMEs can be integrated with the PAN number. நம்ம எங்கயாவது PAN போட்டா MSME இல்லையான்னு சொல்லணும். But அதுக்கு so a lot of MSMEs themselves may not have registered under that Udaan portal and all that. It's a slightly larger subject, but the basic issue is if you are transacting as a company with somebody, it's your responsibility to know whether they are an MSME or not.
No, I will kindle this subject only because I wanted to raise this issue and so
yes,
that
sir.
some remedy can come in the later.
Correct sir. In fact, company letter எழுதும்போது அந்த MSME க்கு நீங்க இந்த லெட்டருக்கு பதில் போடலைன்னா we will take you as non MSME ன்னு கூட எழுதிடலாம்.
அப்படி எழுதுறது better.
That's a negative phrase. Correct.
That's why our clients like that.
Yes sir. And these are all standard letters which they keep sending sir, so it's possible. இன்னொரு இன்ட்ரெஸ்டிங் என்னன்னா, அப்படி நீங்க MSME க்கு உங்க client டைம்ல பே பண்ணலனா இன்ட்ரெஸ்ட் ப்ரொவைட் பண்ணனும் சார்.
Interest provide. And regarding this due date of payment, if no due date has been specified, the date of transaction shall be considered as the purpose for the purpose of this disclosure. That's what they have given in this amendment.
Correct,
date
sir.
of disclosure, does it mean the date of the contract or date of the supply or date of the invoice date or whatever is the date I should take?
It says date of transaction, sir.
Transaction. Date of transaction originates from the date of contract itself, the date of the order itself.
No, sir. When do you book your liability, sir, for a payable? Only when the material or the service is rendered. So, இன்னைக்கு நான் வந்து ரொம்ப சிம்பிளிஸ்டிக்கா do a reading, sir. Transaction that attaches itself to a payable என்ன இருக்க முடியும்? என்னோட material or service receipt.
So according to you, only when the amount, the material has been received, it becomes a transaction.
Correct. Or a service has been received. Material or service.
Okay, madam.
அது கொஞ்சம் கம்மியா தான் இருக்கும். ஏன்னா நீங்க மெட்டீரியல் வந்துருச்சுனா எனிவே GRN போடுவீங்க. GRN போட்டாலே you have to recognize the liability anyway. But yeah, I'm not getting into this because இன்னொரு இதுல என்னன்னா ஒரு பெரிய அட்வான்டேஜ் என்னன்னா சார், நம்மளுக்கு வந்து மெட்டீரியல் மிஸ்ஸ்டேட்மென்ட் இருக்க கூடாது. So goods in transit 31st அன்னைக்கு எவ்வளவு இருக்கும்? May not be much that you would not be aware of. So அந்த மாதிரி you can work back and work on something.
And similarly, this unbilled dues அப்படிங்கிறது according to the materials received for which the bills has not been received. அதான் நம்ம unbilled dues னு எடுத்துக்க முடியும் இல்லையா அப்படினாக்க.
Unbilled duesனா வந்து நீங்க ரிசீவபிள் சொல்றீங்களா பேயபிள் சொல்றீங்களா சார்?
Payable. We are on payable.
அப்படினா என்னன்னா சப்ளையர் இன்னும் இன்வாய்ஸ் நமக்கு கொடுக்கல.
அதான் but the material has been received.
ஆமா.
அப்படிதான் எடுத்துக்க முடியும். Only then it becomes due.
Yeah.
Because what you said earlier, only when the material is received, the transaction gets completed.
Correct,
when
sir.
the
These are nuances, sir.
Why should I bother whether it is unbilled or not billed?
Correct, sir. So these are actually, they have used a very colloquial term they should have said uninvoiced dues. Actually, they've used the term unbilled dues.
Some clarification is required on that.
Yes, sir. I'm sure the ICAI will come out with very clear definition of what is unbilled due.
Similarly, on the long term and short term trade receivables also they say unbilled dues. How can it an amount becomes due for us unless we bill for it or unless we receive a debit note for it?
இல்ல சார், இப்ப நீங்க கன்ஸ்ட்ரக்ஷன் கான்ட்ராக்ட்ஸ் எல்லாம் பண்றீங்க சார்.
I said that's one type of contract. Okay.
Unbilled revenue. இல்ல சார், எனக்கு ஃபார் எக்ஸாம்பிள் நம்ம ஆடிட் ஃபார்ம்க்கே இருக்கலாமே சார். நான் வேலை முடிச்சிட்டேன் மார்ச்ல, ஆனா நான் பில் ரைஸ் பண்ணல இன்னும். அன்பில்டு தானே சார் அது?
அது உங்களுக்கு டியூ கிடையாது. only when you raise the bill because அந்த 31st மார்ச்ல நீங்க அது போடலன்னா accrued receivables நீங்க அக்கவுண்ட் பண்ணலன்னு அர்த்தமாயிடுது. ஒரு
even as an audit firm நம்ம unbilled revenue காட்டுவோமே சார். நான் இன்னும் bill raise பண்ணல. I will show an unbilled. I can show an unbilled revenue, no?
That's right.
Because why do we show unbilled sir? ஏன்னா நம்ம client அங்க TDS புடிச்சு வச்சிருப்பாரு, அதனாலதான். அவர் வந்து accrual basisல he will say, okay, I know the bill is going to come, I will. So, or even if it comes later, they'll make a provision. Yeah, that's why. So it's possible, sir. I mean, இதெல்லாம் ஆனா in my view வந்து நம்ம பார்க்குற kind of companiesல, if it's not an EPC company or something like that, இதனோட impact may not be much for us to worry too much.
That's right. But anyway, the wording should be there in the balance sheet, both by the management as well by the auditor, that those things have been complied with or something like that. Isn't it?
Yes, sir. You're absolutely right, sir. I also feel in fact, even in this entire schedule 3, the wordings could have been much better, sir. இப்போ நான் காட்டினேன் இல்லையா, ஒரு ஐட்டம்க்கும் அடுத்த ஐட்டம்க்குமே they could have described it uniformly. But then I'm sure they've done some thought on this and this is what they've come with.
Anyway, madam, thank you for your patience for having, even though my questions would have been small or...
also, very nice questions, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? So I'll go through CSR in a very, like a story. So maybe you'll just try and at least understand what's there in it, because that is the other major change that came in October, I think, last year. KCS sir, would you like me to go through CSR or should, if this itself you think was high, then we can wrap up.
Madam, we are having time.
10 minutes.
20 minutes.
Yeah. Okay. 10 minutes.
Okay.
So what am I going to? You're able to see my screen?
Yes, madam. Yes.
So So in the next 20 minutes, I'll just explain to you what I think is happening in this CSR space.
Okay.
So applicability of CSR, net worth 500 crores or more, turnover 1000 crores or more, net profit 5 crores or more. இதுல இன்ட்ரெஸ்டிங்கா என்னன்னா, முதல்ல என்ன சொல்லியிருந்தாங்கன்னா, preceding 3 years என்ற வேர்ட் யூஸ் பண்ணதுனால there was a doubt. 3 வருஷத்துக்கு ஆபரேஷன் இருந்தாதான் CSR வருமா? அப்படி இல்ல. நீங்க 5 கோடி தாண்டிட்டீங்கன்னா உங்களுக்கு CSR நெக்ஸ்ட் இயர்ல இருந்தே அப்ளை ஆயிடும். That's the first thing that came. They said, okay, நீங்க CSR பண்றேன்னு சொல்றீங்க, நீங்களே தான் போர்டு, நீங்களே தான் ஷேர் ஹோல்டர்ஸ், டைரக்டர்ஸ், so please make a committee. Certain categories of companies we know இல்லையா, இண்டிபெண்டன்ட் டைரக்டர் இருக்கணும். அப்படி இண்டிபெண்டன்ட் டைரக்டர் இருக்க வேண்டிய கம்பெனியா இருந்ததுன்னா CSR கமிட்டியை இப்படி போடணும். 3 டைரக்டர் இருக்கணும் மினிமம், ஒரு இண்டிபெண்டன்ட் டைரக்டர் இருக்கணும், இல்லைன்னா 2 டைரக்டர், மேக்ஸிமம்க்கு நோ லிமிட். ஆனா if the amount to be spent does not exceed 50 lakhs, CSR கமிட்டிலாம் வேண்டாம். Right? So that's it. Then formulate. CSR committee என்ன பண்ணுவாங்க? They have to make a CSR policy. நான் என்னெல்லாம் CSRல பண்ண போறேன். So 50 லட்சத்துக்கு மேல CSR ஸ்பெண்ட் இருக்கக்கூடிய எந்த கம்பெனியுமே இதெல்லாம் பண்ணணும். amount of expenditure, annual action plan, and the policy monitor பண்ணுவாங்க. Action plan na என்ன? நம்ம லாஜிக்கலா யோசிக்கிறது தான். List of projects. இப்போ வந்து suppose I have a 10 crore budget. I will say, okay, I'm going to do this for children's health program. I'm going to run Anganwadi support. அந்த மாதிரி. How am I going to do it? Who is going to do it for me? How am I going to monitor? So generally, government என்ன சொல்றாங்கன்னா, okay, if you are in Tirupur, try and support Tirupur. Now we spoke about a committee. What is the board role? They say CSR committee will do all the work and then they will come and give it to the board. Board report la CSR policy எல்லாம் வைக்கணும். The responsibility is cast on the CFO. Plus board report la what did I spend? Why did I spend? Where was there? What is my CSR policy? Board is supposed to make sure இந்த வருஷம் 10 கோடி செலவழிக்கணும்னா ப்ளீஸ் செலவழிக்கணும். நான் இந்த 10 கோடியை இங்க கொடுத்திருக்கேன் செலவழிக்க. I will implement. எவ்வளவு அங்கன்வாடிஸ் have we started? How much support are we doing? What health projects? What nutrition projects? What vaccination? Board reportல வந்து CSR committee போட்டுட்டோம். These are the members. இதுதான் என்னோட policy. இதுதான் என்னோட annual report on CSR. So they want the companies to comply and report. So first was provision, compliance, reporting. Failure to spend. Now spend pannala as a company. Reasons for not spending. Transfer such amount to a fund specified under Schedule 7 within a period of 6 months. Ana idu ongoing project arna, you don't need to transfer. இப்போ ஒரு வருஷம் I've spent a lot of money on CSR beyond my budget. I can set it off against the next year's committed spend. நான் இந்த வருஷம் 10 கோடி செலவழிக்கணும், 11 கோடி செலவழிச்சிட்டேன். அந்த 1 crore I can carry it forward for the next 3 years. Now all that, then they brought in the CSR amendment rules. Sorry, I had said October, it is February 2021. இதெல்லாம் define பண்ணாங்க. Another very interesting thing I find is that the government's scrutiny on the non-profit space has just gone up multifold. இதனோட corresponding நிறைய changes என்னன்னா, இப்போ நீங்க, in fact, another big area of practice I think is in the trusts in societies today. The number of compliances have gone up enormously. And I think only Tamil Nadu FCRA contribution in the last 10 years is 20,000 crores. I had actually downloaded the FCRA website and taken this data. Tamil Nadu mattum வருஷத்துக்கு minimum 2000 கோடி. அங்க FCRA என்ன சொன்னாங்கன்னா, okay, a company a CSR entity comes, FCRA கிடைக்குது அவங்களுக்கு. They set up an office in an eminence building in Bombay. The administrative overhead is so big. They appoint one big consultant. They said, sorry, you want to do charity work in India, you spend more money on charity and less on paying your rent and your lawyers. So they cut administrative overheads. Same thing has come here. So in the rules, these are the important things that changed. First, registration. Every entity. இப்போ என்ன சொன்னாங்கன்னா, company can do CSR by itself or through other entities. That's a very important change. யாரா இருந்தாலும் other entities CSR1 அப்படின்னு ஒரு form they have to submit it and it has to be certified. So they are saying the government today does not need to is saying, okay, XYZ Limited, your board report la கொடுத்துட்டீங்க நீங்க, no problem. நீங்க யாரை வச்சு இந்த CSR பண்றீங்கன்றதையும் I want to register. Again, I feel they are going actually after the fund trail, because a lot of FCRA funds in the past, there are lots of press reports on it, on how these funds get used for activism against companies and things like that. So that's a separate issue. But they really want to see the end use of all this CSR money, whether it is Indian CSR money or whether it is FCRA. Administrative overheads, maximum allowed 5% தான். Which means I cannot charge beyond that. I cannot take it to my against my CSR amount to be done. This is very interesting. They said, how can you undertake CSR? நான் கம்பெனி நானே ஒரு CSR மேனேஜர் போட்டு நானே வேலை பண்ணலாம். இல்லைன்னா a company established under section 8 or a registered public trust or a registered society under 12A and 80G established by the company. கம்பெனியே ஒரு ட்ரஸ்ட் இல்ல செக்ஷன் 8 கம்பெனி போடலாம், சிங்கிளா போடலாம், இல்ல இன்னொரு கம்பெனியோட சேர்ந்து போடலாம். செகண்ட், a company established under section 8 or a trust or a society established by the government. Company, trust, society by the company itself, company, trust, society by the government, an entity established under an act of parliament or a state legislature, or a company. The last one is very interesting. You can do CSR through any other company, not being your company or your trust or society, but that company should have a track record of at least 3 years. So, இப்ப நான் வந்து CSR அப்படின்னு சொல்லிட்டு ஒரு 10 ஒரு ஏதோ ஒரு என் ஃப்ரெண்ட் ஒரு கம்பெனி ஸ்டார்ட் பண்ண சொல்றேன், அவருக்கு 10 கோடி ட்ரான்ஸ்ஃபர் பண்றேன், அவர் எனக்கு ஒரு சர்டிபிகேட் கொடுக்கறதா CSR எல்லாம் பண்ணிட்டோம் அப்படின்னு. Sorry, not acceptable. CSR committee has to approve. They have to tell me where the money went, how it was spent, and your friend's company should have a track record of at least 3 years. Surplus, CSR le edo by some chance surplus varuduna, it shall be plowed back into the same profit and it shall not form part of the business profit. Impact assessment. 10 கோடிக்கு மேல CSR obligation இருந்தா ஸ்பெசிபிக்கா இம்பாக்ட் அசஸ்மெண்ட் அப்படின்னு ஒண்ணு பண்ணணும். இது யார் பண்ணணும்? கம்பெனியே பண்ண முடியாது. It has to be done through an independent agency of each project which has an outlay of more than 1 crore. See, I'm not reading the whole thing because I just want to share the flavor. But once you read this PPT, it will be very easy. And adriya soltaanga, impact assessment cost shall not exceed 5% of the total CSR expenditure of 50 lakhs, whichever is lesser. So, நீங்க ஒரு இண்டிபெண்டன்ட் ஏஜென்சி வச்சீங்கன்னா கூட அவங்களுக்கு 50 லட்சம் ரூபாய்க்கு மேல இந்த இம்பாக்ட் அசஸ்மெண்ட்டுக்கு கொடுக்க முடியாது. Or 5%, whichever is lesser. Capital asset acquisition. So, the company can say, okay, I've given money to somebody as CSR, they bought an asset. இப்போ ஒரு ஸ்கூலுக்கு ஒரு land and building கட்டி தரும். The asset shall be held by a company that's established under section 8 or a registered public trust or a registered society or the beneficiaries. So, they're basically saying, and the asset has to vest with somebody. Correct? They say, okay, because the company வந்து CSR-க்கு கொடுத்துட்டாங்க அந்த பைசாவை, somebody has created an asset. So, the asset should vest with somebody. That's very important. அப்புறமா நீங்க என்னெல்லாம் CSR பண்றீங்களோ, if your company has a website, then you shall mandatorily disclose the composition of the committee, CSR policy, projects approved by the board on their website for full public access. And then there are some general penalties for non-compliance, etc. But this is another very interesting transformation. I think there is going to be a lot of work. I mean, I don't practice in income tax, so I don't connect to this too much. But I do know that these CSRs are also turning out to be a big opportunity. Any other questions, please?
Dear members, if you have any question to ask, you can unmute and you can ask the question. Or if you want any clarification, you can ask.
It's a nice presentation, madam, but the recent amendments which have come into the Companies Act over the past 3 or 4 years, in the 3 or 4 months, are something very crucial and which have to be very deeply studied very deep into. And similarly, there are some amendments which are effective from 21st March 2021. That's what they have brought. That is, the amendments have come earlier, but the effective date is only from 21st March. They have also got some impact in our regular audit procedures and other things. I think we should have a discussion with you regarding those things also.
Yes, sir. So I had put that as my first slide. There is a gray area there. இப்போ நீங்க பாத்தீங்கன்னா அக்கவுண்ட்ஸ் ரூல்ஸ்ல ஒன்னதான் டிஃபர் பண்ணிருக்காங்க, மிச்சம் ரெண்டு டிஃபர் பண்ணல. ஐபிசி ரிப்போர்ட்டிங்கும் ஓடிஎஸும் டிஃபர் பண்ணல. அதே மாதிரி நீங்க ஆடிட் ரூல்ஸ் பாத்தீங்கன்னா ஆடிட் லாக் மட்டும் தான் டிஃபர் பண்ணிருக்காங்க. ஃபண்டிங் டு இன்டர்மீடியரிஸ் டிஃபர் பண்ணல, ஃபண்டிங் ஃப்ரம் பெனிஃபிஷியரி மாத்தல, dividend has not been changed. So some auditors feel some parts of this will apply this year, but institute seems to have taken a view, nothing for this year. This is the slide that I had shown.
And similarly, government should come forward with a very definite view from which date it is applicable, whether it is applicable with reference to the statements which are issued after 1/4/2021 or with reference to the statements which are for the financial year from 21-22. That also I think we should get a definite view of the government, what they actually intend to get it. That also we should get it early.
Yes, sir.
And
Yes, sir.
but my understanding is, whatever be the date, even if it is coming only for the financial year 21-22, I think since they expect us to give the previous year figures also, it will be better for us if we collect these previous year figures this year itself, so that we can combine those figures in the next year and we can give it as a comparative performance.
Exactly, sir. This is exactly what I had mentioned. I said, why are we doing this webinar now if everything is 1 year later? This webinar is very important because your client has to start somewhere and they have to start now. And not only for this, sir, for Caro, I think is a bigger, much bigger impact. So both on all this Schedule 3 Caro, they definitely have to take some charge and start working. That's about it. So thank you, Kitsey sir, and thank you, Murugesh sir.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.